Good evening and welcome. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Lewisburg area, I welcome you to Candidates Night. I am Susan Warner-Mills, and I will be your moderator this evening. We want to thank the East Buffalo Township Supervisors for providing this venue for Candidates Night. We also want to thank Sarah Bennett, Marc Lawrence, and WKOK for taping this event. The forum will air in segments in the days ahead, and a link to the event will be posted at WKOK.com. One of the goals of tonight's event is to create an atmosphere that is supportive of the candidates and the audience as statements are made and questions asked and answered. To that end, please take a moment to turn off all your electronic devices. I guess we decided it was better with the lights on. Or maybe they go on automatically.
No, she didn't.
Okay. We request that members of the audience not text, view any electronic devices, or answer phones during the program. Please also refrain from talking. Even a whisper is distracting to those around you who are trying to learn about the candidates who will be on the ballot on May 15th. If you must take care of some important business, please step outside to do so. The League is a nonpartisan organization. It supports positions on issues, but neither, doesn't matter. That's just a prop. Thanks. But neither supports nor opposes any political candidate or party. The League sponsors nonpartisan candidates nights, such as this one, to help all voters become better informed about the candidates and their views on the issues. Candidates are provided the opportunity to express their opinions and to answer questions from voters. Another way the League helps voters become informed is by publishing the Voter's Guide. The Voter's Guide contains biographical information on each candidate and written responses to questions asked by the League. The Voter's Guide is available on the table in the hall outside the room. They will also be distributed across Union County. If you appreciate the Voter's Guide or are interested in what we do here this evening, I invite you to join our organization. Other League publications and membership information are available on the table, in the same table in the hallway. Please help yourself if you haven't already done so. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any other candidates here this evening who are running for any other races that aren't featured on the panel. Yes, please stand and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Rager Kay. I'm running for state representative of District 85.
Thank you. Is your material out on the table? Okay, her material and the material of the candidates here this evening are out on another table out in the hallway. This evening we will hear from candidates running to become the Democratic Party's nominee for representative in the 12th District of the United States Congress. In the fall 2018 general election, the winner of this contest will run against the elected nominee for this same office from the Republican Party. Republican candidates for the 12th Congressional District were invited to participate in this evening's forum, but are not included this evening due to scheduling difficulties. The format for this forum is as follows. Each candidate is allowed up to 90 seconds for an opening statement. Opening statements will be followed by questions from the League and then the audience. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer questions in turn. Each candidate will then have up to 30 seconds for rebuttal. The candidate answering first will alternate with each question. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for a closing statement. The initial questions for this forum will come from the League. The remaining questions will come from the audience and will be screened by League members for clarification and to avoid duplication. We encourage questions from the audience to ensure that candidates are asked questions on a variety of topics. There are index cards available for members of the audience to write questions for the candidates. Just raise your hand and someone will bring a card and pencil to you. Your questions will then be collected if you hold them up. Please do not direct questions to individual candidates. Our timers tonight are Liz Clement and Carol Madel. Will you please stand? Stand and say it. It's in the script. Liz Clement will show the yellow card when you have 30 seconds left to speak. When the time is up, she will hold up the red card. At that time, please finish your sentence and stop. I guess I didn't show all of it. We ask that both candidates honor the time constraints. We encourage candidates to continue discussions with interested voters at the conclusion of the evening. We will begin with opening statements of 90 seconds each. We will hear from the candidates in alphabetical order, beginning with Marc Friedenberg and followed by Judy Herschel. We will then rotate which candidates answers first for subsequent questions. Marc. Yep.
Good evening.
Nope, got it.
Good evening. Thank you so much for organizing this wonderful event. My name is Marc Friedenberg. I teach at Penn State University in the College of Information Sciences and Technology. Before that, I graduated from Columbia Law School and worked for law firms in New York, suing the big Wall Street banks that caused the financial crisis. And I think what you'll see tonight is my answers to many of the questions are going to show that there's really two tracks, I think, in this election and two kinds of choices that you'll have to make. There are certainly policy discussions to be had, and I want to talk about fight for a minimum wage, restoring competition to the economy, Medicare for all, making sure that we get high-speed internet across the district, and those are all really, really important policy positions. But I think there's another track that's maybe just as important, which is that right now we're seeing a systematic attack on many of the fundamental virtues of our system of government and our democracy. I think we're seeing an attack on objective truth, we're seeing an attack on the press, the independent judiciary, law enforcement, and these are things that I think that are deeply, deeply harmful to our democracy, and if left unchecked will make it impossible for us to achieve all of the policy goals that I suspect many of us share. And so I think it's really important that we stand up and say these are important democratic ideals that if we are willing to look the other way, if we're willing to allow Congress to wither away from being a co-equal branch of government, then nothing else matters. So I think that's really what's on stake at stake in the election this year, is a Congress that is willing to stand up for the people.
Thank you. Judy. My name is Judy Herschel. I was one of the women that came forward in 2016 after the presidential election to be part of this solution. And I completed the Women's March, decided what I was going to do, and I set out to do it. I am doing this today for my children and my community members that feel extremely, extremely left behind. When I set out on my campaign, I've spoken to farmers, I've spoken to small businesses, I've met with unions, I've met with rural hospitals, public schools, individuals in recovery, individuals struggling with mental health issues. All of them feel very left behind from our government. I've worked on bridging the gap and the divide in my own community. Unfortunately, nowadays, there's a lot not getting done because we're very divided. From the very beginning of my campaign, I have set out to learn everybody's issues, everybody's perspectives, and get people together to start moving forward. I began my public service at the age of 8 years old, volunteering in a nursing home. I have a degree in anthropology and sociology. I have worked as a social worker, a case manager with the homeless. I've developed programs in the jails, in the schools, in our communities. I developed the first medicated assisted therapy program in my community. I worked with the Department of Environmental Protection on a park project. I am creative, I am innovative, I know how to get the job done, and I understand the community and will continue to learn. I am not Superwoman, but I am telling you right now, I am strong and I never give up. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now time for the candidates to respond to our questions. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to respond. The league has formulated the initial questions. Subsequent questions will come from the audience and will be screened by league members for clarification and to avoid duplication. The first league question: do you feel that infrastructure, creation, repair, and replacement should be a government priority? If yes, what sources of revenue should be used and how should projects be prioritized? If no, please explain the reason for your position. And we'll start with Judy.
I've done a lot of traveling over the last year and have seen firsthand the crumbling roads, buildings, bridges. This needs to be priority, and it's extremely, extremely long overdue. But just not on just the brick and mortar aspect, but also the technology aspect. We are very much behind the rest of the world in broadband and in cell service, which has a huge negative effect on our community. These things are discriminatory towards our rural communities. They need to be taken care of right away. It's hindering our jobs. It's hindering our public education, our health care system, and we need to get it done, and I will commit to that when I get to Washington. Thank you.
You Infrastructure in many forms is arguably the most important job that a government has, is to provide that infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, the information infrastructure, the electoral infrastructure. And I think a lot of those things have been under attack recently or have been allowed to crumble. The bridges and the roads and things, those are certainly issues that should be a priority for the government, and candidate Trump had promised some trillions of dollars to provide funds for that from the federal government, and that hasn't happened. Infrastructure Week is always next week, and it hasn't happened yet. And I think it's important as Democrats that we say we stand for creating the infrastructure in a larger sense that provides equality of opportunity for our schools, your communications infrastructure, your transportation infrastructure, your water infrastructure, that you get clean air and water. These are all important things that are the government's primary responsibility to maintain and provide for everybody.
Thank you. You'll each have now 30 seconds for follow-up or rebuttal, starting with Judy.
What I'm able to see firsthand, compared to other candidates or other politicians, is I see the struggles of what these communities look like not having modern infrastructure in place. And I want to stress how this is important, particularly for our youth. At least half of the kids in my children's schools cannot go home to do their homework, cannot go home to do the homework that is assigned to them. They can't compete in today's global world.
Thank you. Marc?
I think one of our great strengths as Americans is that we can put ourselves in another's place and have empathy for their position. And I think if we leave behind rural communities, we're really failing to invest in their future and in our future, because they're going to be part of our economy in the future. They're going to be integral parts of the community, and it's foolish on both a moral basis and an economic basis to leave them behind.
Thank you. The second lead question. Many people feel that partisan gridlock in Congress has meant that solutions to many of our problems are not being addressed. Do you agree with this statement? And how will you work to change the situation if you're elected? And we'll start with Marc.
I agree with this statement. I don't know if it's partisan gridlock, though. I think that the label of Democrat or Republican, you can look at the registration numbers across this district or in other parts of the country, and they show you one picture. But I think really beneath that, we see an important difference between elected officials and representatives of the party and the voters. And when you look a little bit deeper, I think the main difference is really between the haves and the have-nots. And many of the haves are more than willing to pay their fair share. But they're being manipulated. The party is being manipulated, and Congress is being manipulated as part of this war on the have-nots. And I think that's the main dividing line between us. And I think the people, Judy and I and others, are rising up and saying that we're not going to stand for that anymore. The have-nots need to be given their fair share. We need to invest in the future. We need to accept scientific consensus. We need to plan for what the America of the 21st and 22nd century is going to look like by leaving aside these tired labels that we apply to each other.
Thank you. Judy?
There are aspects of what Marc said, but I'm going to take this further because it's a lot more complex than that. When I set out on this, part of what I needed to learn about was why this divide exists. I have a family that is very much Republican. We disagree on a lot of things. Why is this going on? Because I do agree, one of the biggest problems we have right now is we're not getting anything accomplished because we're not getting along. And it's my job as a candidate and a representative to understand why. So it is about the haves and have-nots, but it's also fear. And it's believing things from news commentary. And it's not talking to one another. And it's not listening to one another. So what I've started to do is to have programs, town halls, events that bring the two together to start that healing. I believe it's important to start that healing now so that when I get to Washington, we can apply that to Washington. And it's working. We're learning from one another, because we cannot get anything done in this complex world today without doing that. So I'm starting in my own community.
Thank you. 30 seconds for follow-up or rebuttal. Marc?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick story about how to do this, how to come together. My father voted for President Trump My father's an educated man, but he's a climate science denier. But he invested in 40 solar panels for the home where I grew up because he understood the common sense kind of economics argument, right? He saw the 15-year return on investment. The Republican Party leadership is a global outlier in denying this scientific consensus. And maybe we don't even need people to understand the science, but if we can get them on the economics, that's what people understand. That's a way that we can build consensus.
Judy?
I've learned a lot in my travels, and we actually have a lot more in common than we have different. And I believe if we center on those things that we have in common, we can build that relationship. No matter who I talk to, regardless of party affiliation, we all want good paying jobs. We all want good schools for our children. We all want actual solutions to the opioid crisis. And we all want access to quality, affordable health care. These are the things that unite us all. And this is an opportunity for us to work on those things and bridge that relationship together.
Thank you. So now we'll take the first question from the audience. A lot of people around here think Democrat is a dirty word. If you get the nomination, how do you plan to get Republican voters to even consider voting for you? And what will you do to help build support for a Democratic vision that might keep building beyond this election? Judy.
I've been getting Republican support from the very beginning of the campaign. Why I think this is happening is Trump brought about something different. And unfortunately, there is an overwhelming distrust of politicians nowadays in our community. I represent something different, change, but different than Trump. And when I go out and I talk to people, I may not agree with them, but I listen. And I don't appease what people want to hear. I always stick to my democratic values, but because I listen and I find common ground, I've found that's what people want to hear. Individuals, Republican, Democrat, Independent, want people that represent them, that they can trust, that will listen to them, that will work with them. And I found that this is working for us. And I will continue to do that, and I will continue to represent everyone in my community.
Thank you. Marc.
I think that the progressive agenda, the progressive mission, not only what it stands for, but in how we present it is really important. I think people are looking for bold ideas, and they're looking for ideas that they can understand and that they can talk about with their friends and with their neighbors. And that's why I think there are important initiatives like Medicare for All and the Fight for 15 are really important, not just because they're good policy and not because they're going to help people's lives, but because it's something that people can understand. I think that is maybe a little bit different from something like the Affordable Care Act, which had a lot of complexity to it. I think people are looking for pocketbook issues that are going to win people over. And I think that Medicare for All is a great example of that people can understand, that they know it's got a good brand, and that they're happy with it, and we can expand it. And I think it's important that we say that we're looking for a fresh face, we're looking for authenticity, we're not looking for prepared speeches or polish, we're looking for someone who's going to speak from the heart and say what they really mean and are in it for the right reason.
Thank you. Follow-up or rebuttal? Judy.
People do want health care for all, which I agree. Medicare for all, I think we have to be very careful with that. Medicare has limitations. It doesn't cover drug costs, it doesn't cover mental health, we need something more comprehensive than that. My community members need that. They need dental, they need medication, they need long-term care. But it shows where we're at. We have complex issues, which I'm going to return to in a little bit, because I have more I want to say on that.
Thank you, Judy. Marc.
I think this is a time to take big swings. We've been conditioned as Democrats, many of us, to negotiate against ourselves and to wonder, are the Republicans going to be okay with this? If you look at the history of what happened with the Affordable Care Act, we can negotiate in good faith. We can allow them to have input into the process, and not only is it not respected, it's disrespected. This is a time, I think, to stand for bold ideas, and I'm convinced that Medicare for All is the way to go.
Thank you. Now the next question from the audience. The opioid crisis is devastating many Pennsylvania families and having an impact on our healthcare system. What do you plan to do if elected to confront this epidemic? I'll start with Marc.
I think that the opioid crisis is certainly affecting so many lives across America. And we need to do a couple of things. First, I think we need to remove the stigma that's associated with addiction. Not just opioid addiction, but other kinds of addiction as well. This is something that some people are just more inclined than others to become addicted to. And if they're following a prescription that a doctor gave them and they become addicted, we need to have empathy and respect for them and provide medication-assisted treatment and to provide counseling. Not to criminalize, not to provide stigma so that people don't seek out the treatment options. That's going to require significant federal funding to provide the treatment, but it's also going to require moral leadership from Washington for somebody to be able to say that this is a public health crisis. It's not a crime crisis, right? We're going to need somebody to stand up and say we're not going to take money from big pharma, and I know Judy has said that as well as have I. And that is not going to influence our decision making. I think nobody's for the opioid crisis, but if you allow big pharma to negotiate the terms, we're going to see results like we've seen with Congressman Marino's vote.
Thank you, Judy.
We haven't prioritized this. You know, any other epidemic or health concern that caused 63,000 deaths in 1 year would have had a much different result. You know, right after our current representative authored HR 471, which flooded the streets with opioids, I lost 8 of my clients. So I have, as a result of that, created solutions in my community, which I will carry over to Washington. We need money, we need funding. We need mental health reform, we need incarceration reform, we need to get Narcan to healthcare professionals. We need to do a lot. We need to hold pharmaceutical companies accountable and doctors accountable. We need to educate people on addiction. I volunteered my time for 1.5 years to teach my community about addiction because stigma is the #1 issue. If we have compassion and understanding and empathy, then we do more. We need to create communities that allow recovery to be sustainable because recovery is possible. I've seen it.
Thank you. Marc, 30-second follow-up.
Thanks. I think this is one of those issues that sometimes people feel defeatist about. And for so many things from broadband to the economy to the opioid crisis, we can say, how is America different, or why is America different from so many other countries? And I think it's corruption. I don't want to get sued for defamation or invasion of privacy that have changed the terms. They've changed the debate in Congress. That's the main issue, right? That's what we're facing. It's a complex problem, but I think that's at the root of it.
Judy, 30 seconds.
Everything I mentioned, we have to do, and we have to work on for this to work. And there's more, but I want to give you hope. I've been in this field on and off for 18 years, and I have seen the most amazing things happen. So in this devastating disease that has affected so many of us in this room, I've not met many people that haven't. Amazing things can happen if we work together. Amazing things happen when we prioritize, and amazing things happen when we understand it. And I want to give you hope for that.
Thank you. Our next question. What is your view of the state's role in creating equitable funding for Pennsylvania's 501 school districts? And we start with Judy, as you figured.
I have 2 school-age boys and a 10-year-old, and I substitute teach. I have teachers in my family and understand the importance. I believe that a measure of our health as a country is directly related to the type of education our children are getting. Every American child, no matter where you come from, deserves to receive the best possible education. And we can do a lot better than what we're doing right now. A lot better. We need to bring back VOTEC. We need the arts. We need apprenticeship programs. We need civics classes. I support our student unions. I am against private school vouchers. And I see every day, because I live in a community that is stricken with poverty, I see every day, and what I offer is the sight of those children with so much capability and so much opportunity that unfortunately, because of the current system, they can't. And we have to be able to give them that so they can be productive members of our society. We owe it to them.
Thank you. Marc.
I think that we all understand the importance of public education, and the state has a significant role to play in that. And I think that we've seen, maybe since the 70s, a systematic attack by one side on public education. And there are probably a number of reasons for that, but I think that we have moved away from this equality of opportunity, especially across the Commonwealth. We're near the bottom of the pile in terms of all the states in the country and how we distribute funds equally across the state. And we've seen efforts to allow municipalities to remove property taxes altogether, which will of course cripple schools. And so that's partly a Harrisburg issue, but it's something that has happened state by state, where we've seen these attacks. Private charter schools are an important part of it. We need to provide this equality so that if you're born in or go to school in State College or Lewisburg, that's great. But it's not fair that if you're born in a place with lower property tax revenue, that your schools are worse off. There's too much human potential that's being left behind.
Thank you. Follow up, 30 seconds, Judy.
Now's the time that we have to invest in our schools. We have to take a hard look at what aspects of our schools do we need to work on to truly prepare our children. We need to be able to incorporate life skills. We do. We need to be able to teach our children what is truly necessary, the tools that are needed for them to be productive members of society. Our families need help. That's not a judgment call, it's where it is, but our children, we have an obligation as the adults of this room to ensure that our children in this country are given the best opportunity.
Thank you. Marc.
I teach at Penn State, and so I see the product of K-12, not just from Pennsylvania, but from other states, and in some cases from other countries as well. And you can see a clear difference, especially in the freshman classes, in the basic skills, reading and writing and ability to communicate, depending upon the zip code where the student came from. And that's just not fair, right? They're not given the same chance to succeed. It's profoundly un-American. We need to give this equality of opportunity so that everybody gets the same chance to succeed, not necessarily the same outcome, but the same opportunity.
Thank you. So the next question. Regarding the great divide in the country at this time, what is the most pressing national issue on which Democrats should work hardest to cooperate with Republicans and help bring the country back together? Marc.
It seems to me that the issue where the likelihood of coming together most effectively is infrastructure spending. I think everybody understands the need for it. I think it's something that has bipartisan appeal, but I think that there has been a corruption where it's private interests have attempted to control how the money is going to be spent, where it's going to be spent, who's going to get the benefit of that money. I think if the parties can sit down and say, this is a significant chunk of the money, this is a significant chunk of our budget, it's a significant jobs program, it's a significant way to grow our economy for the future, that's a chance where we can allow meaningful conversation to happen, and hopefully that's a starting point for more discussions and more agreement in the future. Infrastructure, not only in the physical sense, but in the negotiation sense.
Thank you. Judy.
Let's stand up for this. The gun issue. It has been 19 years since Columbine, and we have not moved an inch. Not an inch. This is unacceptable to me. Absolutely unacceptable. As a mother, as a candidate, as a community member, we cannot allow this to happen. The longer that we go, more tragedies like what happened in Parkland are going to continue to happen. Now, this is a very, very divided issue in our community. We have individuals that only feel safe with guns. We have other individuals that only feel safe without guns. How are we going to get this accomplished? We come together, we talk about it. Now, there are things we can work towards. Background checks, everybody agrees on that. Fine-tuning our reporting system, everybody agrees on that. Where the conversation needs to be had is our assault weapons meant for Main Street. And the reason why many of our communities are not budging, they think that's the beginning of the end of their Second Amendment rights, and it's not. That's where we need to educate.
Thank you. Follow-up, Marc.
There are many common sense gun safety measures that I support and support groups like Moms Demand Action. I think that we've seen after Sandy Hook in particular that it's not an issue that we're going to be able to come together on, that we're going to need to get new people in Washington and in Harrisburg. When the American people were so clearly on one side after this horrendous tragedy or this horrendous outrage, and we weren't able to get action then, that's the clearest evidence to me that that's not something that we can come together on. We need new leadership.
Thank you. All right, we touched on this question a little earlier. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yes, you do. So I'm sorry. I checked it off and moved on. Go ahead, please.
We need new leadership, but we also need to confront the issue of the gun lobbyists giving out information that may not be true or may involve or evoke fear. So if we don't go out and talk to our community members that are listening to what the gun lobbyists are saying, there will be a backlash to any legislation that is passed. Most of the individuals that I talk to squash these misconceptions do start to understand. But it takes everyone in this room to make sure you have those conversations and we continue that conversation. All of that is important.
Thank you. And you're going to start. Apologies again. Next question. We did touch on the Affordable Care Act, but maybe in a little more detail, what is your position on the Affordable Care Act? And start with Judy.
Our current Congressman Tom Marino voted to repeal it, which would have kicked millions of people off. Healthcare is the number one thing that I hear about it. It's too unaffordable, it's not attainable, medications are too high. People are trying to make a decision, do I pay my medical bills, do I pay my other bills, what do I do? We're all one medical bill away from bankruptcy, a huge medical bill away. I am for fixing the problem at hand and working towards a universal healthcare for all system. And the reason I say that, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to do this, and we cannot wait for alleviating the other problems. We have to work on those issues too. So many people are going bankrupt. So many people cannot take their medications, our seniors. We can't wait that period of time. We have to go in that direction. A healthcare for all system is what we need, but we cannot do that and not alleviate the issues of today, which are very evident.
Thank you. Marc.
I think that America is sort of becoming a healthcare backwater because there are forces that seem to not be interested in the number of people that are insured. Estimates from the CBO, we saw this debate last summer with the attempted repeal of the ACA. That's important, right? That's the issue. People want coverage. It's going to cost some money to provide it. The question is, do we think it's worthwhile as a society to invest in it or not? Most of the rest of the developed world has. Now, the ACA, as I said, was a really good step, and I fought vehemently against the repeal effort. There are too many ways to cripple the ACA. You can do it through regulation. You can do it as part of a tax bill in December that nobody got to read that removes the individual mandate. It's a complicated mechanism. We move to Medicare for all. We say this is something that Democrats delivered. This is something that's not so bad, right? This is something that people can get behind and hopefully will stem the tide or even reverse it against government is bad and government can't be trusted.
Thank you. Judy, 30-second follow-up.
I wanted to reiterate that it's really important that we take a hard look at developing a system of health care for all that covers all aspects. Medicare has holes in it. Medicare does not cover long-term care, medication, does not cover for substance use, mental health. We need a system that is all-encompassing. That's going to take some time, but it is so important we work at the problems at hand right now. There are seniors in our community that cannot pay for their medications. That it needs to be resolved right now.
Thank you. Marc, follow-up.
Medicare doesn't cover everybody right now, it will, and if it doesn't cover other kinds of treatment, it will as well, right? We invest in the things that are important. If you're American, you're lucky, you were born in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, or came to it, and there's this basic benefits package that you get. It includes you're going to get good health care, you're going to get an education. If you put in a fair day's work, you're going to get a fair day's pay.
Thank you. Next question. What measures do you believe are necessary to reform our criminal justice system to help build a healthy, safe community that helps all people in our district and state? Marc.
I think that this is an opportunity for me as a lawyer, as a candidate, to stand up against this attack that we've seen on the credibility of law enforcement and on the independence of the judiciary, this so-called judge comment, I don't even know how long ago it was now, that I lost sleep over, because as somebody who's worked in the courts and has worked for judges, if we don't have respect for the system, it's a branch of government, if we don't have respect for it at the federal level or at the state level, we can talk about other criminal justice reforms that are needed, and there are a lot, and I suspect we agree on many of them. But we need to have faith in the system. We need to have faith in the police officers that are enforcing the law and that they're doing so fairly. But we need to remove politics from it, because once it enters it, it's going to be impossible to remove it.
Thank you. Judy?
I agree with Marc with everything he said, and I want to add a couple things, but I want to also offer a perspective into our area that has not been brought up that is very important. I think it's very important that we look at demilitarizing our police. I do respect all law enforcement. I think they do a very tough job. I've got close friends that are police officers. This is something that is very close to my heart. But there's a lot of work that we can do. We can encourage our police officers through training to understand their communities, through cultural awareness. There's a lot we can do. The problem that I see in our community in many of our rural areas is there is no police coverage. There's none. I have part-time police at my home. There's days that go by that there is no police coverage. If there was an emergency, I would often have to wait 2-3 hours for somebody to show up. This is also discriminatory against rural America. So it's not talked about because unfortunately it's not prioritized. But this is extremely common throughout our district and directly related with EMS also.
Thank you. Marc, follow-up.
When I was in law school, as part of a course, I created a tool called the Collateral Consequences Calculator. It was something that defendants who were looking at plea deals could see what were the consequences of an offer that was on the table. And what I learned in doing the research and in creating the tool is that you wouldn't believe how many consequences there are in your ability to get a job and your ability to get government services in terms of immigration. I think that we need to have a much more humane approach to law enforcement and some of these collateral consequences, because once you get sort of into the system and you're unemployable, it becomes a much bigger problem for everybody.
Thank you. Judy, follow-up.
I'm going to continue with what? My son had a seizure several years ago. It took the ambulance 45 minutes to come to my house. A friend of mine had a car accident. It took over an hour for the police to come to the house. So even if this isn't an issue that those of you can particularly relate to, this is an issue that affects thousands of people. So I think it's an important time to bring that up. I do think that we do have work across the United States as far as what we talked about earlier, but our rural communities is what I'm here to advocate for today too.
Thank you. Next question. Should the House vote to impeach the president? Would you have any qualms about voting to impeach? Judy.
There are currently several investigations underway that involve the president. I believe the prudent thing to do is let's wait to see what the results are of those investigations. I think we know the direction that they're going in. But I want to add this. No one is above the law. No one. Not even the President of the United States. And he will be held accountable. Absolutely be held accountable when I'm in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Marc.
Impeachment is a political question, and I'm a political candidate, so I'm happy to talk about it. If we see that there is obstruction of justice, and if you tell a news reporter that you fired the FBI director because of a Russia investigation, that might be pretty clear evidence of obstruction of justice. When we have the House, I think it's something that we need to seriously consider. Robert Mueller is going to do his investigation. We'll see his report on obstruction this summer. But I think it's not something that we need to be afraid of. We need Congress to fulfill its role constitutionally. Obstruction of justice has been the basement for impeachment before. It would be perfectly valid as an exercise of congressional authority to use it again.
Thank you. Follow-up, Judy.
I've had the opportunity during my campaign to talk to several current sitting congressmen and women and senators, and had the opportunity to speak with Senator Gillibrand about this topic not too long ago. And from her perspective, it's going to be much easier to go a legal route rather than impeachment because it takes so long. By the time we got there in January, 2 years of that term, by the time the term happens, impeachment may not be the way to go. There are other ways too. If he has broken the law, the legal route, according to her, would probably be easier. So we have to wait to see what happens. Unfortunately, I'll come back to that.
Thank you. Marc.
The authority is fairly clear that you can't indict a sitting president, but moreover, I think it's important as a political matter that we say the law is important, and we say that it's important that you not perhaps encourage interference in our election, that you not turn a blind eye to ongoing interference and threatened interference in the 2018 election. And we say that there is a system, there are norms, and if you violate them, there are consequences, no matter how long they take.
Thank you. Next question. Do you support Nancy Pelosi staying as Speaker? Mark?
I do not. I think that we've seen so many losses by the Democratic Party during her leadership in terms of electoral consequences, that it's time for new leadership, it's time for a fresh face, and I think a lot of people are ready to turn the page. I'm certainly among them.
Judy, thank you.
I respect her wisdom. I respect her work experience. I think now, going into 2019, is the time for fresh, new ideas. I do understand the importance of having women in Congress. It's very important that we elect qualified women to represent us. Nowadays, we do understand as women how our health care and our ability to make choices is in jeopardy. That is important, but not a reason to keep her. I think now is the time for us, when we go in there in January, to practice our democratic right to vote for who is appropriate, but I suggest now is the time for a new outlook, new fresh ideas for the Democratic Party and for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up, Mark.
I respect the question, but I just wanted to add that I think it's important in my campaign that I'm going to be focusing on issues at the local level and what I can deliver for the people of the 12th Congressional District. Those questions of national leadership are important and are certainly worthy of discussion, but my priorities are jobs, healthcare, education, and the environment right here.
Thank you. Judy, follow-up.
It's a time for fresh ideas because so many of our community members do not feel like their voices are being heard right now. And when you're not in touch with Main Street, like many of our politicians are, you lose sight of that. I have firsthand perspective of the vast majority of the problems that we face today. And when you have that perspective and you have that outlook, you have a passion to want to change that because it affects you absolutely directly. That I will do.
Thank you. Starting with you again.
Thank you.
It's a little complicated. What is your position regarding abortion? Starting with Judy.
I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe that's a decision that not one of us in this room has any business putting their opinion in when it involves somebody else. It's a very difficult decision. I believe that we need to continue to fund Planned Parenthood. It provides crucial health care to women and families. And I will do whatever needs to be done to uphold Roe versus Wade. That is not the way to reduce abortions. In areas where they have restricted or outlawed abortions, the rate of abortions have actually gone up. So if you are truly pro-life and want to promote families, let's work together on those programs that truly do that. Roe v. Wade, not the way to go. Bottom line.
Thank you. Mark.
It strikes me as an issue that ultimately is between a woman, her family, and God, but it seems like an issue that the government should not be involved in. In the House, we have no business with regard to Roe versus Wade, which is a matter for the courts and for the Senate, and certainly I hope that it is not overturned. But I think that we need to make sure that there are programs that are funded adequately, that we make sure that birth control and contraception and sex education are widely available, that we make sure that people are educated and that they know the choices that are available to them.
Thank you. Follow-up, Judy. 30.
I was brought up in a home with a mother that always told me that a woman could do anything, that there's equality between men and women. And it really irritates me that in 2018, we are still dealing with these issues. And I have a difficult time with that. I will not accept that. That is a bottom line for me also. The future generations should not even know this. And our right to choose and our right to our health care is priority.
Thank you. Mark, follow-up.
I support Planned Parenthood and I am opposed to A Handmaid's Tale.
What will you do to help combat global climate change? Mark.
I think we need to, in the U.S., we're sort of out and in at the same time. We need to recommit ourselves to the Paris Agreement. We need to limit our greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 emissions. There are some great opportunities for us to be able to do that. In Pennsylvania, we've been at the forefront of the last 3 energy revolutions in coal, oil, and natural gas, and we can and must be at the forefront of the 4th, renewables. We have the infrastructure for the research, the development, manufacturing, and installation of renewable technologies here. And one of our great assets as a state is our natural beauty. We can protect that. We need to make sure that there is federal funding that is available for that kind of research and development, tax incentives for it. We need to make sure that we have a Congress that isn't bought off by the fossil fuel interest and that is willing to see and embrace the climate consensus that is understood and respected by not only 97% of scientists, but literally every other political party across the world.
Thank you. Judy?
I'm just going to talk about the environment as a whole right now because I think it's all put together and it shows the lack of priority that our current administration has for the environment. I have a poster in my office and it says, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children." And that is my truth. And we're doing a really shitty job at it. Put it bluntly, really shitty job. So rollbacks to the EPA need to be reinstated. Back in the Paris Accord, we need green energy jobs. We need to move in that direction right now. People want it, they would provide more jobs. Now, this is why it's so personal to me, and the perspective that I bring, unlike anybody else. I've got a gas drill 1/4 of a mile in my backyard, on my neighbor's property. And this is the yard my children play in. This is the yard that my well water comes from. Environmental concerns, I live them every single day. Right there. And I will fight with every bit of my breath to make sure we are making better decisions.
Thank you. Marc, follow up.
Yeah, I think climate change affects all of us. So just to give you 2 little examples from State College that I've been involved with recently. There was an effort by Toll Brothers to do some development on a land where runoffs would have caused serious harm to the drinking water for everybody in State College. Then Nestle was looking at adding a bottling facility in Center County. And because of widespread popular opposition, and I was a part of that, they've decided to move. Now they may move to another part of Center County, and we'll have to fight that for another day. I think that's not about climate change, but it is about the environment.
Thank you. Judy?
I live in Susquehanna County. My neighbors can't drink the water. We need to understand the importance of regulating the gas industry and holding them accountable to best practices. And not just the gas industry, all corporations need to be held accountable. Clean air, clean water is a priority. And the amount of money that is spent in campaign contributions to our current representative and other politicians is ridiculous and awful. And I will not take campaign contributions. Sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. Next question. What is the appropriate role of the federal government in our lives in Pennsylvania? For example, in schools, police, consumer protection, and environmental protection. We'll start with Judy.
The federal government should play a very big role today in the importance of investing in many of the issues that you just mentioned. The federal government needs to take an active role in investing in our public school system and in infrastructure right now. They need to take the lead on that. Our state governments right now cannot afford any more money to be able to do that on their own, and it must be the federal government right now that interjects and finds a means to be able to do that.
Thank you. Marc?
It's a tough question to answer in this time, but I think generally where I see roles for the federal government to involve itself in state or local politics are probably in 2 areas. First, when there's a market failure of some kind, where there's a lack of competition, and I think in broadband and high-speed internet, I think that's such a place where it's not profitable for some companies to provide cable internet service to somebody's home, so they're left out altogether. That's an opportunity for the government to step in. And then the second place is where there's a denial of equal protection, broadly construed, or some due process under the law, where somebody's not given that same equal protection, that same equal opportunity, whereby dint of the zip code where they were born, they're not given the same opportunity. That's a failure. We've seen states fail people before. We've seen Pennsylvania failing people now. Where that happens, where that equality of opportunity is not present or the playing field is uneven, that's where the federal government steps in, because we're all better off when we're all better off.
Thank you. Judy?
We have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in this country. The federal government has an obligation to ensure that we all have that equally. Unfortunately, under the current administration, certain things have been enacted that have gone against that. The tax reform bill is a perfect example of that. And this has allowed me opportunity in my community because Republicans, Democrats, non-voters are starting to understand that too. There's a need for change because our current federal government is not adhering to those things.
Thank you. Marc?
Yeah, I think it's unpopular to say maybe in some quarters. I'm a big fan of the federal government. I think it delivers in a lot of different arenas really good results for really good prices. The brand maybe has been tarred, I think, a little bit unfairly. I'm spending a lot of time away from my job, away from my kids, doing this campaign because I think it's time for all of us to step up and say the government is worth fighting for, public service is worth fighting for. We need to be the ones who make it popular and make it something that we can be proud of.
Thank you. Next question. How would you move voters and legislators toward decisions based on fact and scientific research versus emotion and half-truths? Marc?
It's not easy. I think at some point you can't ignore the ground truth, right? I don't know if we're at that point yet in climate science where we've seen an increase in the number of unpredictable weather events and sort of historical weather events and storms of historical intensity. If it comes to there is a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that is not protecting consumers, people are going to feel that in their wallets. If there are tax cuts that were supposed to go to consumers but are overwhelmingly going to corporations and to the wealthy, people are going to feel that in their pockets. At some point, it breaks through. You try to present it to people, you can try to show clear charts, you can try to show data. I think it's either they feel it directly or you tell a story. I think that humans are really story-driven creatures. If you can tell them a story, that's what is the most effective. For legislators, if they're being bought off, they're never going to get it. For people, legislators are kind of people, eventually they will get it.
Thank you. Judy?
This is a question that, believe it or not, keeps me up at night because we live in a very interesting era right now where facts are presented, but people don't believe. And information is out there, but the truth is a lie, the lies are true. We turn on the news, it's one different story a different day. I think, because I've thought a lot about this, the reasoning behind this has a lot to do with this divide going on. And has a lot to do with the divide between the parties and misinformation going out. It has a lot to do with that. So I'm going to go back to what I started this conversation with earlier, is that in order for us to bring credibility back to politics and to go back to the basics and be able to get to a point where we look up to our politicians, we've got to bring character back to Washington. We've got to be role models for the politicians that we would want to see, but we also have to encourage our community members to start to come together and learn the truth and respect one another.
Thank you. Marc, follow up.
I mean, certainly education plays a part in it, and that's a sort of a long-term solution. But I do think it's important, again, from a position of moral leadership, maybe it's not something that you vote on, to say that we respect the free press, to say that if there's one narrative and another, sometimes they're both kind of true, but usually one is the right one. And another is one that somebody is pushing for some reason. That there's not equality between facts. There's one fact and one lie, and maybe multiple lies. And we need to stand up and say black is black and white is white.
Thank you. Judy?
But now is a time for personal contact and communication. I go into situations with Republican community members, and most likely I hear this: you're going to take my guns away, or you're a baby killer. I don't sway away from that conversation. I stay and I talk. And about 90% of the time, and I talk, they listen, they understand, and I understand. There's something to be said about each and every one of us in this room doing what we can to start to bridge that gap, because I'm seeing it's working.
Thank you. Next question. Are there any substantive issues or priorities on which you and your opponent differ? Judy.
Let me think here. I think generally speaking, we agree on a lot of stuff, Mark and I do. I think we have different experiences. I think we have different ideas on how to get there. I think a main difference that I have with my opponent is that I have an extremely broad idea and understanding of the district as a whole. And I am actively working on bridging the two parties together and getting that conversation continued so we can develop solutions. My experience with public service for almost over 30 years and having those direct insights into what is going on, I think separates us. The issues, I think we agree. What I bring to the table is more direct insight, more knowledge of it, and more knowledge of the community as a whole.
Thank you. Mark.
I think I have some knowledge and insight. I think on the substance, Medicare for All, I think has revealed itself to be an area of substantive disagreement. And then I think that this is something that, I think this is our fourth debate, that we've seen maybe different approaches in how we would go about bringing some of these changes, and how we would advocate for them in Washington. I've got my history with the law, my history with technology, that I think really speaks to one of the critical issues for this district, which is rural broadband and connectivity, standing up to corrupt institutions like Wall Street banks, through the activism work that I've done against Glenn Thompson in the 5th Congressional District, standing up to recalcitrant congressmen. I think this is a time for big ideas, for going on offense, and for leaving it all out on the field.
Thank you. Judy, follow up?
I believe one of the issues that Mark and I disagree on is I believe that we need to take a hard look at the Electoral College, and Mark he disagrees with that. Also, too, it's very important for me to convey, I continue to talk to people and get my information directly from individuals. And a line of concern that I had was that Mark had mentioned that veterans in his area feel like they're getting the health care they needed. I have not met one vet in my community that feels that he is getting the health care he needs. That's why it's important to get that firsthand perspective.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
I think just to respectfully clarify a few points, what I was saying was that for veterans, they're happy with the care once they get it, that there's too long of a wait, there's too much paperwork, but the care, once they get it, they're generally happy with. We need to make it easier for them to get it. For the Electoral College, there was a question about legislative reform, and I don't know if that's possible, but constitutionally. But I think that, for one thing, the Electoral College can work in our, as Democrats' favor once we make a few tweaks to states like Texas. But more importantly, we need to first look at state-level compacts to get the popular vote winner nationwide elected, and we need to get more voters registered and turned out and voted.
Thank you. Final question. If you lose the primary, will you support your opponent in the fall election? Mark.
If Judy would like my support, I would be happy to give it 100%.
Yes, I would.
Thank you. I don't think there's any need for follow-up. Would you like to follow up? No. All right.
Can I say something?
Sure, you've got a few seconds here.
I think we've got too much on the line right now to not do anything. And the big picture is that we have to flip the house. We have to. There's too much going on. And I just ask each and every one of you to do your part in any way. You know, many of us are running for office for the first time. Many of us are writing letters to the editor for the first time. Do what you can, but at a minimum, I know this is not pleasant, talk to your Republican neighbors and friends. Talk to them. Listen to them. It's not fun, but let's start to bridge that divide.
Thank you. You all set?
No.
Okay. All right. I want to thank the audience. We've had a really impressive crop of questions this evening. Thank you very much. We will now end with closing statements of 90 seconds each, and we'll start with Judy.
Now is a time for true representation in the 12th district. Everyday people just like me are running for public office because we want positive change and we want a government that is for the people and by the people. And we're ready to roll up our sleeves and deal with these very complex issues. Working towards health care for all, reinstating the EPA, getting gun reform safety done now. We are still behind the national average in family income. Our area it lacks the basic infrastructure to compete in today's economy. We need money in our public education and our children's schools, not taken away. I'm going to fight for our most vulnerable populations, our children, our seniors, our veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with mental health issues, substance use disorders. And I'm going to fight for what is right. I'm going to fight for equality. And I'm going to stand by the working and the middle class and stand up against special interest and greed. My name is Judy Herschel, and I would be proud to run for U.S. Congress for you. I ask for your support with volunteers. I ask for your thoughts and prayers, and maybe a happy birthday wish, because today is my 41st birthday, which I would not want to be anywhere else. And I ask for your vote this fall, or this week coming up, May 15th, because I can win. I am the woman to beat Tom Marino this fall, and I'm ready. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say first, I love Bucknell, wonderful university. It's been the honor of a lifetime to run for Congress. Whatever happens next Tuesday, I know as Democrats, we'll have made the right choice. And what I found is that it has been so much more fun and so much more rewarding than I had expected. And so I hope for the younger folks, or maybe the older folks too, who are thinking about running for office one day, please do it. Your voice means something. You have an opportunity to make a difference, no matter your background. Congress is there we're representatives of the people, right? And so it should be from the people. I've been really, really proud in my campaign so far to get great support, especially from the college students from Penn State. A couple of them are here tonight, who have really dedicated themselves tirelessly to the campaign, who are really ready to put their backs into the work, to do some of the thankless things that need to be done, but I thank them for them, and that they're ready for big change in the fall. We're going to need to get students, college students and high school students registered to vote like never before, and the work is underway to make sure that happens. We're going to need students to volunteer. We're going to need people who are good with technology and can work leanly, because we're not going to be able to compete with the Republicans in terms of the amount of money that we raise. But I think that we can work smarter, we can work better, and we're definitely going to win this thing. My name is Marc Friedenberg. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got to stick to my script here. I want to thank both of the candidates who took part in our forum this evening. Democratic government could not exist without citizens like you who demonstrate the interest and ability to run for office. Thank you. We congratulate both of you on your civic responsibility. Now it's up to the rest of us as voters to make an educated choice and go to the polls on May 15th. We invite candidates to meet informally with the interested voters at the conclusion of this meeting. Please help yourselves to the voters' guides, as well as to the candidates' literature and other league publications, all of which are available on the tables outside in the hallway. Thank you again for coming. We'll see you at the polls on May 15th. Good evening.